this on. We'll call the Monday, August 23rd workshop meeting to order. We have one agenda item, and that is student support update and discussion, and I will turn the discussion over to Superintendent Evenson.
Good evening, Chair Polly, members of the board, members of our community that are able to join us this evening. We're excited to be able to have a work session this evening and really answer some questions and share some information that we think might be helpful at this time. The topic tonight is student support update and discussion, and educational equity and what that looks like at Jordan Public Schools. And the why behind that is because there have been a lot of questions. We've had questions from the community. I know you board members have had questions. And it's really important when our partners in education reach out for clarity that we are able to provide some of that. So our objectives tonight, as we move into the school year, is to review who we are as a district, what is our mission, to talk about equity, equality, and inclusion, what that actually means and what's the difference between those things. What does outcomes and opportunities mean? There was a reference at one of our last meetings, and I've had a couple of conversations about that, so it's a good time to really talk through that. And then what is critical race theory and what is culturally responsive pedagogy? Because those are two extremely different things, and I think people might not understand that. So we want to make sure we take the time tonight. So again, who are we? The mission of Jordan Public Schools. Jordan's focus is on understanding all students and connecting with all students to inspire a caring community, to ignite learning, innovation, and success for all.
So that leads into equity education and really what does that mean and why do we do it and why is it important work? So I think it's important to note that the equity work here in Jordan was established years ago. So when I came 6 years ago, we were already on a path of having conversations about equity education in Jordan because it's really important work so that we're able to carry out the mission of all students, not just students that fit into a certain box, but all kids because we are charged as a district to serve every kid, every single student that comes to us, regardless of their ability level. And then why is this work important? Really, and talked about that, but looking at the needs of all of our students, regardless of their background, their learning needs, their future goals. We have students who, once they graduate from high school, they are going to enter the workforce and be a wonderful member of society. We have students that will go into the military and serve our country, and we have students that will go into some type of post-secondary opportunity. It's our responsibility to make sure that we're serving those kids. And if you think back to just our board retreats over the last few years, that's really been the focus of what we talked about how do we serve all of our kids. And our Summit Academy and our different programs that we've implemented have really led to meeting the needs of all of our kids. So regardless of the background, we need to focus on connecting kids to their path where they can be successful. As a middle school principal, 5 years ago, we revamped how we structure our exploratory classes to give kids diverse options. So there's an example of a change that we've done based off of the equity work to be able to prepare our kids. But the bottom line is every kid deserves to feel safe at school. They deserve to feel welcome. They deserve to be affirmed for who they are, and we're going to continue to, as I said today with our kids, we're going to continue to love and serve our kids and balance that with love and accountability so that they can be prepared for the next steps. And then we're going to strive every single day to create an atmosphere that makes sure all kids feel welcome. So in front of you, you have some shoes. And there's a lot of talk about equality and equity, and those are two very different things. So those shoes, I won't say which family member, that is one of my family members' shoes. She may have told me not to take the ones that she's currently using because she wanted to take our dog for a walk. But anyways, those shoes, I don't remember what size they are. If any of you dare, you can look inside and see. But from an equality standpoint, if we would go down to the CERT and we would say, you know what, we're going to play a basketball game, and then I'm going to give $100 to the team that wins, And I would say all of you have to wear those shoes. There's some other factors that would play into it, but some of you would be at an advantage because of that, of the shoes you're wearing. And Ryan, I hate to tell you, but you might be at a little bit of a disadvantage. So from an equality standpoint, we would just give you all size 7.5 or 8 shoes. From an equity standpoint, we would say, Ryan, you've got some nice shoes on that work for you. You're going to wear those. And the rest of you, you're going to have the right fit shoe. It's not holding anyone back, but it's actually setting people up for success so that they can excel forward. So just a simple example, and for the sake of time, we won't go through things. But I think it's important when you look at, if you can go back, when you look at that graphic, one of the first things that jumped out to me is, I like this graphic for a lot of reasons, but I don't like it because it assumes that the student needing the most support is a student with some type of physical disability. Because that kid in a wheelchair, in order to see over the fence, yes, they need a ramp. But if we're talking about maybe overcoming obstacles, overcoming adversity, boy, that kid is going to outshine, possibly, I'm making some assumptions, maybe a kid that is in an honors class. So depending on what we're doing, we are going to match kids with what they need in order to be successful. That is equity. So a kid may be what does that look like on a tangible level? A student may be in, high-level CIS classes at the high school, and they may also be receiving support from our counseling program. A student may be on an IEP for reading, and they may be in a CIS math class because their needs are different. That's equity. So looking at this quote from the department, I think it's important to note out that an equitable outcome is based on the student's needs, and that's going to be different based off of what that student, where that student is at with their gifts and talents. It's our job to bring those things out and help that kid or that student move forward. They talk about a systematic change in there, and sometimes that can be a buzzword. Let's just name it in our society right now. But an example of that at a very simple level at the middle and elementary over the last few years is a program called READO. So we have a student who told his teacher that reading a book in his 8th grade language arts class that the main character was from Among Heritage. It was the first time that this 8th grader had ever seen himself in our curriculum. So all READO is, at a simple level, it's bringing text in, and Miss Miller was one of the people involved in doing it, along with our language arts teachers, bringing text in, most often picture books, that teachers utilize to support whatever given topic they're talking about. So it may be theme, it may be setting, it may be plot. And then they're using those picture books to teach those concepts, those standards. First time that we had one of our Hmong students see himself in the curriculum. And think about the engagement level for that student from when he never saw himself to where he saw himself in the curriculum. So just a simple, tangible example of a simple tweak of our curriculum. It wasn't a huge system change. It was our teachers just tweaking their practice. So going into just outcomes, the word outcomes, oftentimes we can look at it very, very broadly. So an outcome could be that all students have access to a safe, welcoming, affirming school. That could be one of our outcomes. One of the questions that I'll be posing to my staff is, what does success look like? And we're going to be looking at our MCA data. So MCA data is important, but it's not the only measure of success of a school year. Our kids learned a ton last year that don't show up on those MCA results. So a narrow view of this, Obviously, we would all agree that a narrow view of this would be very concerning, be unrealistic as well, because each student has a unique set of needs, just like if I would say all of you have to wear those shoes and we're going to go out and play basketball, that's unrealistic. And then the word opportunities is most representative of our schools. And I think those of you that have been on the board for a while, you know that that's been a constant conversation at the board table. How do we provide opportunities for all kids in order to move forward?
So then the question has arose, what is critical race theory and how is it different from culturally responsive pedagogy? So in recent months, the topic of critical race theory being taught in K-12 education started garnering headlines and fervent discussion at the state and national level. So some of the voices opposed to critical race theory have spoken out, and some of the current concerns would be that it would create division among students and staff, that students could be singled out based on their identities, and that they would learn a skewed version of American history that presents the nation as fundamentally racist and white supremacist. Moreover, some view critical race theory as a means of shaming white teachers and students for being a part of that oppression. But really, it's important to understand what critical race theory actually is. So, what is critical race theory? And to be honest, it wasn't really until last spring when these questions started to be asked at other school board meetings in the local area that I really did that deep dive into what critical race theory was. Because in all of my educational work, it really hasn't come up as something a part of K-12 education. So really that made a deep, deep, deep dive into everything that really was attached to critical race theory. So what is it? It's a perspective, it's a theory, it's a verb. It's a lens to analyze through. It is a practice that puts race at the center of critical analysis. It's really a discipline and an analytical tool that began in law schools in the 1970s to help those law students think critically about the impact of historical and present-day racism on the legal system. In the 1990s, some colleges started using critical race theory to help aspiring law students better understand inequities with the goal of improving performance. And then it really does place race at the center of analysis. Critical race theory scholars interrogate policies and practices that are taken for granted to uncover the overt and covert ways that racist ideologies, structures, and institutions create and maintain racial inequity. So really, when you look at critical race theory, it's the lens of analysis that you would look through. So it really was this deep dive into critical race theory and its attachment to education, and really understanding and looking at our standards, that critical race theory is not a part of our standards. And it does say something that if you ask, a lot of the people attached to the world of education what critical race theory is, that it hasn't been a part of our background or our education throughout all the way up through the doctoral degree for me personally. It was not a part of that education. So the term critical race theory has been misinterpreted as referring to any sort of attempts to teach diversity or equity. Teaching history from multiple perspectives, that's critical thinking, not critical race theory. Discussing race and racism as a part of the curriculum, that's critical thinking, not critical race theory. And focusing on culturally responsive pedagogy, that's best practice. So then it's really important to really look at then what is culturally responsive pedagogy. We set the framework of what critical race theory is and that lens of analysis specifically in the legal field of study. So now what is culturally responsive pedagogy?
So as we move into culturally responsive pedagogy, up until even 7-8 months ago, we were still using the term culturally responsive teaching, which when you put it together, CRT and CRT, it frames itself to have some confusion. So we have gone about and changed that to pedagogy, and just basically here's what culturally responsive pedagogy is: a research-based approach that makes meaningful connections between what students learn in school and their cultures, preferences, and life experiences. These connections help all students access rigorous curriculum, develop higher level academic skills, and see relevance between what they learn at school and their lives. So one of the key things in culturally responsive pedagogy is the idea that every student comes with a lot of different pieces of culture in their lives, and it could be socioeconomic, it could be race, it could be gender, it could be that they come from a single parent family, it could be from where they live. whether they live on one side of the neighborhood or the other side of the neighborhood, their age, and it could also just be their background experiences. One child comes from a military family, another student comes from just a completely different type of atmosphere. And so it's our teaching responsibilities to find what fits for each of those students. It's not to teach them one way that's right and one way that's wrong. It's to teach to them and meet their needs at where they're at. And it comes back into what Ben was talking about with equity. So understanding students' lives can help teachers to foster that sense of belonging and ensure that we build relationships with them. Perspectives, diversity, critical thinking, these are all foundational elements in Jordan's vision for culturally responsive learning and teaching our students, all students. Allowing all students to feel safe and supported in their learning environment by responding to each student's interests, knowledge, and background. So as I kind of broke this down and looked at it, just some of the different ideas, instructional materials would be much like Ben was talking about, allowing students to see themselves in the curriculum, allowing them to see that I'm among student and, oh, there's among student in the text that I'm reading or that I'm looking at. It's things like finding different ways that students connect. Not every student is a sit in a row and raise your hand to answer a question. If you don't raise your hand, then you're in trouble. You know, some students need to blurt things out. So it's diversifying what we do for our teaching skills. And it's things like call and response or blurting out, allowing movement. I think we all have students that we know or people that we know, and the students need to move more often. Some students need that quiet writing, but it's doing all those different techniques to try to reach all students and using all of those different tools in our tool belt. So that's the framework for culturally responsive pedagogy, is trying to meet the needs of all students in their learning. Now, one of the things about culturally responsive teaching, it's a requirement in the teaching licensure and relicensure for the state of Minnesota. In 2020, the licensure renewal categories, there's 125 hours. If you're a current licensed teacher and you need to renew your license every 5 years, these are things that you need to have in your license for a total of 125 hours. You need to learn positive behavioral intervention strategies, that's PBIS, reading preparation, key warning signs for early onset mental illness in childhood and adolescence, English learners, so we're working with our EL students, and cultural competency. And that's a Minnesota state standard through something called PELSB. And PELSB is the Professional Educators Licensing and Standards Board. So one of the things that's talked about in the PELSB requirement is this idea of cultural competency. And if I could really just narrow it down from all the words that are on here to what it means, is the key is for teachers to understand and know where all students are coming from. So it's giving them a background in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different of those cultures that I just talked about before, and knowing how that's going to impact what they're delivering to students. So those training programs are designed to help teachers build relationships with students' families, and the school communities.
Now, since we've had some time to understand what critical race theory is, being able to understand what we've been doing in Jordan with culturally responsive pedagogy, now it's important to compare the two. In a culturally responsive pedagogy, race is only one point of focus. It's not our only focus. Race is just a single aspect of a student's culture, and like Jeff and Ben had talked about, there's so much more that students are coming with us. Part of it is also their home culture. We have to honor the fact that students are coming from homes that are different than the student they're sitting next to. And it's our job to honor that. Discussions of race and privilege may, should, and often do arise in our curriculum. For example, when we teach things in history that relate back to the civil rights movement, it's really hard to not have race come into that conversation. However, nowhere in our district curriculum is there specific teaching of race as the only lens of analysis. And that was what Dr. Yamlin had talked about, is critical race theory is that really that specific lens of analysis which relates back to race. Culturally responsive pedagogy does not teach that individuals are inherently responsible for actions committed in the past by members of a like group. Culturally responsive pedagogy also does not divide, it actually does the opposite. It provides space for all of our students to be seen, appreciated, welcomed, acknowledged, and recognized for who they are as individuals. As a district, we do not focus on race as the permeating factor in all that we teach and do. We support the whole child. On this next slide, Jeff referred back to that whole CRT, and it's been, a few years where we've been practicing culturally responsive pedagogy. We've been referring to it in the educational field as CRT. Yet this is where that confusion has come up. When we think about, actually over time, I was talking with Ms. Miller, who has specific training in culturally responsive pedagogy. And really, culturally responsive teaching goes back even further, when at one point it was more referred to as culturally relative teaching, which then evolved to culturally responsive teaching, and now it's gone through another evolution to be culturally responsive pedagogy. So we are constantly evolving, and that's a big part of education. If you've been in this field long enough, as many of us here have been, things evolve because we learn more, and we know better, and so we do better. When discussing culturally responsive pedagogy, it's important to be clear in our language, which is why we've shifted some of the things on our website, some of the communications that we've put out, to just make sure that we're clear and we're transparent. The other thing that's important to know, it's not just a few stakeholders that are charged with this effort of culturally responsive pedagogy and teaching educational equity. If you look at the slide up here, actually these are all of our stakeholders that are involved in our school community in supporting this effort. Some of the things to take note, we actually have some professionals listed here that are specifically trained in equity and culturally responsive pedagogy, and we lean on them and their training and their expertise to support our equity work. Yet, it's not just on their shoulders, it's on all of ours. So if you look here, we have achievement and integration professionals. That's actually money allocated to our district for the specific reasons of supporting the achievement of students and making sure that we're integrating a lot of this equity into our daily practices. We acquire that because we have neighboring districts that have some disparities with regards to achievement, and some of it is related to the educational opportunities that are afforded to those students. We have administrative and district leaders, principals, superintendent. Our school board is a governing board. That's a big part of educational equity and making the decisions for our district. We have other educational partners in this room as well. Our parents, people who are members of Curriculum and Technology Advisory Council, our teachers, those people who work with targeted services to support our students who are at risk in academics as well as social emotional learning, our paraprofessionals. We have a number of different councils. SEEK is our Special Education Advisory Council, APAC, our American Indian Parent Advisory Council, and many college partners that are really supportive of our equity work. We also have board policies and legislation that we are using to guide our decisions and to guide our work in our schools. That happens at the board level here, and it also happens at the state and federal levels. When we take a look at what our students participate in and what tools that they use within our school system on a daily, regular basis, we have different student groups that are a part of the work we do with equity. At the elementary level, we have our, we call them our DLC juniors, our diversity leadership crew. Those students are in charge of leading our Harambe. And if you look at one of our activities, Harambe there, it's a celebration. I guess, for lack of a better word, it's kind of a pep fest, where we all come and gather and celebrate a lot of the work that we're doing in our schools that relate to academics as well as the social components of school. And that word Harambe actually translates to come together. So when we think about coming together as a school community to be able to honor and recognize and acknowledge our students, that's a pretty awesome thing to be doing in our schools. Our diversity leadership crew is our middle school students. They actually come and they mentor our diversity leadership crew at the elementary school, but they also are tasked with leading opportunities at the middle school, such as planning different dinners, different events that happen at night, talent shows that are once again celebrating diversity. And that our equity leadership crew at the high school, they are working at hosting our courageous conversations to be able to acknowledge that diversity within our schools. They often partner and work side by side with our Shakopee and Prior Lake public schools next door in leading those and going on different events or field trips to partner with them. When you look at the community outreach, once again, some of these groups that are listed up above are charged with these. The Eagle Feather Banquet really pertains more to graduation and being able to offer our American Indian students an opportunity to embed their culture in that ceremony with their eagle feather. That's a part of our American Indian Parent Advisory Council. We also know that Curriculum and Technology Advisory Council is a critical role in reviewing some of our programs and making sure that they are diverse. Ben talked about some of our electives that have been offered at the middle school and high school. A lot of those electives came from conversations at that group. We also have the C group, which Mr. Williams, our Special Services Director, leads, and that is a council that makes sure that we have an inclusion model where all of our students who have special needs are included in our mainstream classrooms. And then finally, our student activities. Some of the things I've already mentioned are caring and committed conversations that our high school equity leadership crew team participates in and leads. One other thing I forgot to mention is our diversity leadership crew helps to make the lunch for that, so really involving them at all levels. We also have additional camps and learning opportunities. We had a horse camp, a drum camp this last summer that was provided. And then Rito, Ben mentioned, at the elementary school, I would say it's probably one of the students' favorite times of the day. The actual term Rito, Miss Miller and I were talking, it actually came from a bingo concept board. We're looking at Rito being at the top and having kids make selections of text under just the R column, the E, the A, the D, and the O, and being able to know that they have an opportunity to make some choices and have voice in how they proceed with their learning through diverse texts that relate back to literacy elements like Mr. Bakeberg was saying, you know, making predictions and inferences and just seeing themselves in their books.
So that's a lot of information, and I think it's important just to talk about where we go from here. The important equity work that's being done in Jordan, it's been happening for years. I feel like we work really hard to get better every year at educational equity. You as a school board have been a part of that for many years, and it's really important in the success of our students. And I would go on, you know, I would also note that it's separate from the state and the national narrative that's out there right now, because this is best practice. This is what we do for our students. And critical race theory is a separate conversation. It's a theory, it's a lens. Somebody asked me recently, and I just said that's some college law school stuff, that it should say something that we literally had to research it and figure out what it even was, because it is not part of K-12 education. And it's not a curriculum, and it wouldn't be approved to work with our students. And so I think that's important as well for the board to know. And the responsive teaching piece, the culturally responsive teaching, is research-based, it's best practice, and our kids really have been successful in becoming who they're meant to be, and really successful Jordan graduates with that. I think, as I'm processing and thinking about how we start the school year, I think it's important for our families to know when we say all students, all means all. And, we are there to support all of our students. We honor differences, we value diversity, and we celebrate the similarities and commonalities that our students have. And I think that's really important. We continually ask our students, and we want to know what their needs are as well. And it's important that they feel seen in the curriculum. It's important that they feel recognized and heard and understood and represented. And I think our teachers do a really good job of meeting the students where they're at to help them be the best that they can be. And all really does mean all. So with that, I would open it up. The whole team is here for any questions. We all do better when we ask questions and partner. So what questions might we be able to answer for you?
I just want to thank you for clarifying. I think it's really important to distinguish the difference because the CRT thing has been very confusing for people. Honestly, it has.
Absolutely.
And we've been both using CRT, that acronym for many years, unfortunately. That the other CRT
Yeah.
has come on board, but I think it's important to know that CRT is not used as support.
One of the things I guess anybody can weigh in on, but, I get feedback, concern about, what equity of opportunity versus equity of outcomes, right? And, I think if you guys came forward with a plan that was foolproof to get every kid to graduate, I'm sure all of us would be behind that. At the same time, if we have a kid who has a shot at getting into Harvard, right? I think there's anxiety that resources that may be able to help that student may not be there. And so I'm just curious as to whether that's a misplaced fear or just what your guys' thoughts are on that.
I'll start, and then I'll have Jeff probably weigh in on that at the high school level. But I think all parents, myself included, regardless of if my student's at the Harvard level or at the Mankato State level, I think we all want what's best for our students and wonder and hope that the resources are there. Now, I will say in terms of best practice with the differentiation in the classroom, we continually work with our teachers to strive to do that. I know that some families feel like in a classroom of 25 or 30 students, that's really challenging. I will say our staff rises to that challenge. When I was a teacher, that was one of the first things I would look at as I was planning my instruction for the day was the lens of how might I need to scaffold this, either for my higher achievers or those that might need some extra support in a different way. I think Jeff mentioned earlier, or maybe even Melissa mentioned some of those college partnerships. I think with our academies, I think with the CIS courses, I think those have been really important partnerships to help give kids access to some of those high-level components. We do try to be everything for all students and all families. Of course, there will be times that we maybe can't meet some of the exceptional needs, but we work really hard to partner with parents and figure out how to meet those needs. Yeah.
Hold that thought a minute though, because Jeff was going to chime in to finish answering Ryan's question.
That's
So,
okay, and I can,
okay, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
I've got it written down.
Sorry. To answer your question, Lauren, I think Superintendent Evenson addressed some of it from that differentiated instruction. I think the other thing is to keep in mind is that we also know that as elementary teachers, we have to make sure that we're meeting students where they're at, and that's at all levels. So if a student is at a certain level, we want to make sure we continue to see them progress. We've done things in the past like subject acceleration, grade acceleration, but we also know that students have to be developmentally ready to meet those additional programs. And that's the part that's tricky, is that for some students, academically, they may look like they're ready, but some of the other things, when we talk with the parents or our school psychologist or our school social worker, there may be some things that they're not developmentally ready yet for that are best meeting those needs in the mainstream classroom with the teacher supporting them and scaffolding that instruction at their level. And that's also why we have board policy that doesn't start till 3rd grade for those acceleration opportunities, because the research shows that really until that point, kids may not be developmentally ready for those challenges.
So just to touch on more about the high school level, Superintendent Evenson touched on a few of them with our CIS, CE classes. You know, we have partnerships with Normandale, Central Lakes College, Minnesota State University, University of Minnesota. We've got our Summit Academy courses. One of the other things that we offer, and this was about 3 years ago, is we started offering Spanish at the middle school for credit. So I know of at least 4 or 5 students that will spend their last 2 hours of the day at the high school taking Spanish 1 and then taking geometry, so 9th grade math, as 8th graders. So we are doing some things to honor those students. It may not be in every subject area. One other area that we are currently investigating is through our MTSS meetings a few weeks ago. We had some really good discussion on not only what interventions do we do for our students that are struggling, but what interventions do we do for our students that want to exceed. And an idea was shared out that hasn't been vetted yet or anything like that. It's just a starting process of creating our honors classes again, but the honors classes wouldn't be a separate section. That's where it costs us money, is because if we, let's just say it's Civics 9, and right now we have 5 sections of Civics 9. If we had a honors Civics 9, now we've got 6 sections of Civics 9, and that's going to cost extra money to have the teacher teach that. Does that make sense? So it's extra cost. But there is a way that we could implement honors and extend that learning for students that want to, and they could be in any of the hours of the day and do those extensions and do those deeper dives into civics and earn that honors denotation on their transcript. So it wouldn't cost money, but it could be something that we do. And again, that's just in the vetting stages, but it would go on to their transcript and it would push those students further and be that carrot maybe on their transcript to make it look better for the Harvards or something like that. I can say with confidence that the last time I counted, we have students could earn 40, if they could work it into their schedule, they could earn 48 college credits staying at Jordan High School. So there are a lot of accelerated opportunities. They may not be in all the areas, and some of that's, we're trying to give big opportunities in a small school, and sometimes we're still limited by that. Any other questions with that piece for the high school? Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. And Melissa, any comments or questions? Lauren?
In the curriculum, are there any underlying themes associated to critical race theory? Like, because I don't know that, I guess I know we've had a little shift, but I'm just wondering if there's any underlying themes.
No, I'm just trying to think even.
Well, I feel like the perception is out there
Oh,
that
got it.
there is. So how
Yeah.
do we change that perception so people don't have the perception that you have critical race
Got it.
theory within the curriculum?
Got it. So here's where I would go with that. So the first thing is, you said critical race theory. The first thing I would ask is how that person is defining critical race theory. Because I will say, and it's something that, you mentioned as well, there's a lot of confusion out there about critical race theory, and I think it all begins and ends with people are defining it 1,000 ways, none of which are the actual definition of what critical race theory is, that lens, that college-level law school lens to look at policy, systems, and structures, and an analytical tool. If they're defining it as, is there equity Is there inclusion? That's not what critical race theory is. I will say in probably every bit of curriculum that exists, we would see equity, and that's a good thing.
That is a good thing.
That's something we would want to see, and that would be a big step, I think, in the right direction in terms of what our mission is as a district and what, you know, our board has prioritized over the years. So I would say underlying themes of critical race theory, absolutely no. If someone is not defining critical race theory accurately, that could be a misunderstanding. Because we will have equity, we will have inclusion. That is what we do in schools.
And I will say the culturally responsive piece of this has been very helpful, because in my mind, after listening to this, it feels like our teaching staff is meeting the students at their background, at wherever they are in their life or in their education versus not. So the Hmong example that you gave, Ben, was actually perfect.
You're absolutely right, and I want to take that a step further. Our staff, and not just our teachers, our paraeducators, our custodians, our kitchen staff, all of our staff, you as a board, work really, really hard to meet students where they're at and to support the whole students, our counseling, school social workers, our clerical staff. And again, it's part of our mission, and that's ingrained here in Jordan, and I think that needs to be recognized as well as a real positive.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to respond and say I am kind of the middle of the road board person, not the longest and not the newest. Everything that's been talked about has not been taken lightly. I serve on 3 of those boards as educational partner, which means I choose to take 3 more meetings a month, minimally, to the 2 board meetings that we already attend. It takes a long time to create an academy. We worked really long, hard hours to get where we are, and I'm so proud of where we are, but I want more. And poor Jeff. We work really hard on the special ed board to find every opportunity on those nights to meet the needs of the parents. The kids are getting their needs met at school, but the parents are saying, how can we get more education for our kids? And we try really hard in our communities and in our world to make them feel welcome and get everything that they need. I'm a grandma, I'm a mom, I'm an alumni that I'm so proud of this school. It takes a long time. It takes an incredible amount of money to make this happen. When you say, we'll just add a 6th hour on that civics class, do you know how much money that costs? Not that every single kid in our district isn't worth that. They all are. And we wouldn't all be sitting here if we didn't want to give kids more opportunities. But it's hard work, and we're doing the work. We're in the trenches. We're making it happen. The finest day for all of us is to sit on that stage. When those kids graduate, each one of us have blood equity into their graduation. When we shake their hands and that diploma goes across, that's us graduating. Personally, I take that. That's an accomplishment. We work really, really hard. So I want the community to know we're not turning our backs on anything. We're not hushing anything. We're working really hard to make all kids have, in the special ed world, I want every kid to have an IEP that goes to Jordan High School and Jordan Elementary School and Jordan Middle School. Each kid that goes to Jordan deserves every education opportunity, us collectively, you as a community, you as leadership, that we can give them. We will work really hard to stretch our dollars as far as we can to make every child be treated with respect and dignity and become a graduate of Jordan High School and Jordan community. We sat and wrote our strategic plan, and I remember we were in Mankato and we said, we want to stay Mayberry, we want to stay small town, but we want to give them every opportunity of a big school. And by God, we are. Thank you for your time.
That was very nice, Connie. I'm sorry, I have to comment. That was exceptionally said. I could tell.
Any questions for us as a board from any of the administrative team? Any support or anything that we as a board can do better to support you in your work and in the hard role that you play of the fine balance between the great work that you do?
An open checkbook would be great.
Except, no.
So I will just say one thing, because you mentioned the Summit Academies and all the things that we've really worked to expand. I've only been in this role for a few years, so from the teacher's perspective, I can definitely say that going to Visner, as he was my principal at the time, and being a part of building the Summit Academy, and then the support from the board through all of that, and then really understanding that authentic education, talking about equity and meeting the needs of our students, that's what authentic education is. It's finding what students want and how they want to grow and helping them get there no matter what it is, because success is defined so differently for every single student. And as educators, it's so important to remember that and to help them achieve that success that they need. So for the board, just allowing us to keep dreaming and keep building, and we will get agriculture in the Summit Academy, I promise you. We will someday, but it does cost money. It does, and we understand that. So just to the board, thank you for supporting that and supporting the sometimes out there dreams that a lot of us have with things like that.
Is it all right if I add one more thing to that? Just
Absolutely.
what made me, the one thing that Aaron said about the Summit Academy, and I know we're kind of going on to that and praising it right now, but, we're not blessed with a lot of restaurants in Jordan. Most people would agree. One of those restaurants came out of our Summit Academy, or the dream for that, for Delia's, came out of our Summit Academy and came out of the student with his mom and his brother and his sister, and he dreamed of having a restaurant in Jordan instead of having a stand, that they would have a brick and mortar building. And we have that, and that came from his dream and his planning in our BME class. So just something I wanted to add to that a lot of people might not know, but it's pretty cool.
Thanks for that, Jeff. And I've been on the board for a long time, and I think that's one thing that we have been working on for years is the whole career tech, the opportunities for, as Superintendent Evenson has said many times tonight, as well as the administrators, for all kids. We know that all kids are not going to be four-year college-bound Harvard kids, and we just want to provide an opportunity for every single kid, no matter where they are in life. And that's a great example, because I don't believe did he go to trade school even, or did he just go? He went to a trade school. Okay, a great opportunity for a kid to go into trade school, fulfill his dreams, and become a successful entrepreneur out of that summer program. So, thank you. Now, I just want to personally thank Superintendent Evenson and the staff, and then please relay it to your teaching staff too. We know that the work that they do is hard, and we know that there may be a time or two, not often, when a mistake is made, and we have to deal with that when it is, but 99.9% of the time, their hearts are in the right place, and they're doing the right thing, and they're reaching kids where they're at, and that's what we're all about. So. Anything else on this? Thank you. Thank you, team, for putting this together. Any wrap-up, Superintendent Evenson?
No, I would just one. Thank you so much. As a board, you have such a strong vision, and just your care for students comes through, and the work you put in as well. I don't know that the community realizes how many hours of preparation, even for one meeting, that it takes, as well as all of your work supporting events in the community for our kids. And we appreciate that as a staff, because again, when we partner, our kids always do better. And so great appreciation for that too.
Thank you. And on that note, I will call the special meeting for Monday, August 23rd to order, and it is 7:20. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Here.
Ryan Dinger,
Here.
Connie Hennig. Here. Lauren Harrison,
Here.
Sarah Lane,
Here.
Molly Monahan.
Here.
Noting that Sandy Burke is not with us tonight. Consideration of the agenda. This is a special meeting, so there can be no alterations to the agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as was published 3 days ago.
Motion to approve.
A
I'll
motion
second.
to approve. Sarah, second. I'll give Ryan the second. Okay, we have 16 consent agenda items. We have the new hire of our Nutrition Services Director, Kelly Razor. New hire middle school lead, Maya Buss, comes in at a grade 2, step 5. New hire elementary school site lead, Stacy Gander, grade 2, step 7. New hire ELS teacher, Katie Angel, MA 2. New hire elementary school teacher, Molly Huss, BA 1. New hire elementary school teacher, Alexandria Hillman, BA 1. New hire elementary school teacher, Michael Roger, BA 1. New hire middle school paraprofessional, Vicki Smith, Schedule A, grade 2. New hire elementary school paraprofessional, Erica Nagan, Schedule A, grade 2, lane 1. New hire ELS paraprofessional, Deb Weirkey, grade 6, Schedule 6. New hire middle school paraprofessional, Joe DiMaggio, Schedule A, grade 2, lane 8. The resignation of elementary school paraprofessional Alexis Furman, resignation CERC front desk assistant Lou Eric White, resignation CERC front desk assistant Ellie Helgerson. I think some of these kids went off to college. And resignation of CERC front desk assistant Abigail Visner. And then we have a leave of absent request for elementary school paraprofessional Janae Vogel. So I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent items.
So moved.
Connie, is there a second?
Second.
Second, Molly, discussion?
Good luck to all those all those kids that are going off to college.
Yes.
Couldn't get the right words out, sorry. And then, I'm so sad that Janae is asking for a leave of absence, but, hopefully she'll be back.
Yes. And welcome to all the new hires, too.
Exactly.
So, okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Action and discussion item, review and act on the resolution to adopt the health and safety measures for the 21-22 school year. Superintendent Evenson.
Chair Polly, members of the board, it is strongly recommended by MSBA that school boards pass a resolution that addresses the needs of our local school district and clearly identifies what strategy the board is implementing as it takes the health and safety of its students and staff seriously. The Jordan Public Schools Safe Learning Plan follows guidance developed by the Department of Education, the Department of Health, in conjunction with monitoring local data, the Centers for Disease Control, guidelines, federal requirements, consultation frequently with Scott County Public Health, and stakeholder input and feedback. We require what is required and recommend what is recommended. Tonight's agenda contains a resolution action item, JPS resolution adoption of health and safety measures for 2021-2022. In passing this resolution, it formally confirms the health and safety planning our district has previously communicated to families. As noted, any major shift in health and safety planning that is not a state or federal requirement would be discussed with the board chair and ultimately come to the board table for discussion and potentially action in the future. As noted, a summary of our fall health and safety planning was discussed previously at several meetings and has been communicated already to our families.
Okay, and with that, this is a really important resolution. I think it's important that it's read for the public. So I will read it. It's health and safety measures for the 21-22 school year, whereas Minnesota statute section 123B.09 vests the care, management, and control of independent districts in the school board, and whereas the superintendent of Independent School District 717, hereinafter the superintendent, is responsible for the management of the schools, the administration of all school district policies, and is directly accountable to the school board, and whereas when responsibilities are not specifically prescribed, nor school district policy applicable, the superintendent shall use personal and professional judgment subject to review by the school board pursuant to the school district policy 302, superintendent, and whereas the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the Minnesota Department of Health, MDH, have determined that the COVID-19 pandemic is currently ongoing and may remain ongoing for an unknown time, and whereas the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on educational issues related to COVID-19, and, take a breath, and whereas the MDH has issued and may continue to issue written guidance for Minnesota schools on public health issues related to COVID-19, and whereas the superintendent and the administration of the school district have conferred with the school board regarding COVID-19 health and safety measures, the current CDC, MDE, and MDH requirements for each, and other relevant information, and whereas based upon the collective consideration of these factors, the superintendent has recommended to the school board that all staff, students, and visitors within Independent School District 717 buildings are recommended but not required to wear a mask regardless of vaccination status. All staff, students, and visitors within Independent School District 717 buildings, regardless of vaccination status, are recommended to follow the strategies of physical distancing, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfecting, and staying home when sick, be implemented at the commencement of the 21-22 school year. Now therefore be it resolved by the School Board of Independent School District number 717 as follows. Section 1, the superintendent is hereby directed to implement the following health and safety measures to open the 21-22 school year. All staff, students, and visitors within Independent School District 717 buildings are recommended but not required to wear a mask regardless of vaccination status. All staff, students, and visitors within Independent School District 717 buildings, regardless of vaccination status, are required to follow the strategies of physical distancing, hand washing, and respiratory etiquette, cleaning and disinfecting, and staying home when sick. Section 2, the superintendent is hereby authorized after consultation with the school board chair and notification to the school board to select and implement different health and safety measures for the school district or any specific school buildings without school board action if the superintendent reasonably believes that prompt implementation of different health and safety measures is necessary, and that constraints of time and public health considerations render it impractical to hold a school board meeting to approve the implementation. Section 3, the superintendent will provide regular updates to the school board regarding the school district's efforts to implement COVID-19 related educational and public health guidance issued by MDE and MDH respectively. So I will entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
I move to approve this resolution.
Okay, Connie, is there a second?
I'll second.
Ryan seconds. Okay, discussion.
Where it references required, what makes something required and who makes that decision?
Those come from the federal government or the state government. So an example of that right now is a federal requirement on public transportation that we are required to adhere to masking on our school buses in all capacities. The initial date on that, I believe, is through September 13th. I know that Publicly, they're sharing that will be extended until January. We've not received that notification yet. Our communication in our health and safety plan says until further notified.
So if the federal government says, after the Minnesota State Fair, just kidding, if the Minnesota State government says, or the Minnesota government says, we're going to require, the governor says we're going to require masking, that's a requirement, and the school board has no choice.
Correct.
And this would have been very similar to what we've, like, I know I was not on the board last year, but you guys approved something very similar to this. And then you follow the guidelines that was recommended, and required was required.
Correct.
Okay.
Other discussion?
Under section 2, it says the superintendent is hereby authorized after consultation with the school board chair to end notification of the board, meaning we wouldn't come together and talk about this publicly. It is just a conversation and notification.
As I discussed in the executive summary, should there be any major shift, I would call the board chair, and the board chair would direct either to have a meeting or to make the decision.
Okay.
Do we have a feel for, I know that there's allowance for emergency meetings within statute. Do we have a feel for what does and doesn't rise to the level of emergency in a situation like this?
An emergency meeting is truly an emergency. It would be like if a tornado came through. It's pretty strict, the state statute is pretty strict and pretty egregious reasons to have a quote emergency meeting. It could be if, God forbid there be a terrible accident and we'd have to figure out,
So it's something like this likely would be subject to
a special meeting.
the posting, the requirements of open meeting
3
law
days,
posting, all
yes.
that stuff.
And I would think that if the state or the federal, they wouldn't do it overnight. I hope and pray they don't do it.
Yeah.
But if they would, that we would have enough time to call a special meeting. We can call a special meeting that we have to give 3 days notice for. So that if that's your question, a special meeting can be called with 3-day notice. An emergency meeting, is like what happened when the pandemic hit last year and the state was a year, the world was shut down on March 23rd. That Sunday, March 22nd, Matt called an emergency meeting, and this room was filled with the administrators, and I came up here and was part of that. So that was truly an emergency, so.
Am I mistaken, was there some kind of guidance given on a transitional period should something take place from the state? I can't remember if there's a communication on.
Not that I'm aware of. It's, right now with local control, they're relying on school boards to make these decisions, which is why I actually feel better having a resolution in place. Because it's very helpful to know and for our public to know what the procedures are and what that would look like. I can tell you in terms of any major shift, my preference is to have it at the board table and have the board make those decisions. I wouldn't be interested in just, making a shift, really in any capacity without that board support and board discussion on that. The only aside from that would be if there was a strict, tomorrow this is what is happening, and then that wouldn't be something as a board you could decide or I could decide anyway.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the only way that the state could do something mandatorily is if the governor would do another executive order.
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Good questions, other questions? Well, let's just hope and pray. I've heard that this Delta variant kind of does a high peak and then comes down fast, so
Yeah.
let's hope. Any more discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call, please.
Deb Pauley,
Yes.
Ryan Daner,
Yes.
Connie Hennan,
Yes.
Lauren Pedersen,
No.
Sarah Lehman,
Yes.
Molly Monyer.
No.
Motion carries. Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.